Alright, so the next tool that we're going to cover is the install tool. So this is how you actually go out to the internet and install packages using the npm command line tool. I'm going to go ahead and make a new directory here called install and just cd into it. So we've got an empty folder here, and the first thing we want to do in order to keep track of what we did installed is do an npm init. So like we learned in the last video, you can go ahead and type npm init and then just -y, and that'll not ask you any questions and just put that package.json file there. So the simplest way to use npm install is to just find a package name like npm install express, and then you can do --save if you want to save it to your package.json. Otherwise, it'll just make a folder called node modules right here in this directory and install it there. So I'd like it to save, so I'm going to go ahead and type that and just let it go. While it's installing, I just kind of wanted to show how you find these package names. The easiest way is to head over to the npmjs.com website. You can kind of browse around and look for whatever it is you're looking for. So in this case, Express, and I can click on it. And whatever name it has over here for the package name and down here as well, that's exactly what you're going to want to type into your command line. So if it was like, express-app, that's what we type. But in this case, they have the express namespace. So let's go back over here. This is finished. So I can ls now, and I see this node modules folder. And if I ls inside of that node modules folder, I can actually see not only that express is in here, which is right here, but all of its dependencies have been installed as well. So you can kind of get a nice idea of what's Express requires. And then if I were to go ahead and open package.json, I will see down here that Express has been declared as a dependency. So a couple of things I wanted to touch on with the install. Let's go ahead and clear this. As we saw over here, we can do --save, and it'll save it in our package.json as a dependency. But when you think about it, there's really two types of dependencies. You can have things that are necessary for your app to run, like a web server, like Express. And then you can just have things that are necessary for other people if they want to develop on your app, but they're not necessary for it to run. So if we go back to the website and go to their homepage, we can see that's something like Gulp, right? So Gulp is definitely going to be necessary if you want other people to help contribute to your app once you start using Gulp. They need to do it to build files, but it's not necessary to, say, deploy your app. So if we wanted to install Gulp on our application, we would want to do something a little bit different, which is we do npm install gulp, and then we would do --save/dev. So save dev, let's go ahead and do that, is going to do a very similar thing. It'll put it in the node modules folder just like everything else. It'll put all its dependencies in. The only difference is it's going to write it to a different key in that package.json. So instead of showing up in dependencies, which is what's required to run the app, this is going to show up in dev dependencies, which is what's required to build the app, to contribute to the app, things like that. So that's a pretty cool difference. Let's go ahead and open up package.json, and we can see now I've got my Express dependency, but I've also got Gulp as a dev dependency. One last thing that I'd like to cover is you can do some cool things with install, like you don't have to give it an npm name necessarily. You could give it a link to a file, like a tarball or a folder with a tarball inside of it, and it'll know how to unpack those from there. You can also do save optional, just like we did save dev for optional dependencies, and we're going to get into those in a later video. And then the last thing I wanted to show is that you can do version control. So let's say we go back to npm and we find something that we really want. Okay, like let's do Browserify. Let's say we really need Browserify for our application, but for whatever reason we know that we need, you can see over here Browserify is at version 13, and let's say that we really need version 10 for whatever reason. What you can do is back in the command line, you can do npm install Browserify, and then you can do an @ like this, and you can pass in a version. So everything on npm is done with semantic versioning, meaning that there's 3 numbers separated by periods, and the very first number is going to be for major breaking changes. So this is like version 13, and then these are going to be minor changes, and then these are going to be like little patches, little no breaking changes, anything like that. So if we wanted version 10, we don't have to specify necessarily the dot whatever. It'll grab the latest of version 10. But we can be as specific as we'd like to be. So we could do, if I knew what one was, like 10.1.1 or whatever. But we can just do browse verify at version 10 and then -- save dev and let it go out and do its thing. And so this is a way that you can basically keeping control over how up-to-date your packages are, which is really important for production apps. And we'll see in a second that this not only is going to save it as the dependencies, but it's actually going to lock in this older version number so it doesn't accidentally get upgraded later. There's any number of reasons you might want to do this. Mostly is because you haven't tested out the new version yet and you're not sure if your application will work with it. So we go inside package.json and we can kind of start seeing now that the other side of these keys for these dependencies are a version. So the ones that we did without specifying, they find the latest version available and they say up to that. Express up to 4, gulp up to 3. But this one that we specified, it does it the same way as though 10 was the latest version. So browse verify will never update past version 10 unless we go in here and change this. So that's, I think, what I wanted to cover with npm install. It's aliased as npm I, so you can go ahead and type that instead of installation. I guess one big thing that I missed is that if you're contributing to other people's projects and you pull them down from GitHub, say, if you do an ls, you'll probably see that they do have a package JSON, which will probably be full of a bunch of dependencies, but you won't have the node modules folder. So if you type something like npm start, it's not going to work because you don't have those dependencies. So you should get used to running npm install with no arguments every time you pull down a project from the internet that you haven't built before. And that'll go through, it'll read the package.json, and it'll give you everything that you don't currently have. So I've got them all, but if I was missing any, it would go ahead and install them.